The vast Galactic Council chamber orbiting Nexus Prime was silent as Ambassador Jake Morrison entered, his footsteps echoing through the cavernous hall. The year was 2425, and humanity had served the Council for 3 decades, fighting their wars, building their trade routes, and supplying medicine across the galaxy. Ambassador Morrison, a 52-year veteran diplomat with silver-streaked hair and eyes that had witnessed the rise and fall of interstellar treaties, strode confidently toward the central platform. His posture betrayed no hint of the tension coiling inside him. Lieutenant Kate Sullivan, his idealistic young aide with bright eyes and an even brighter future in diplomatic service, followed 2 steps behind, datapad clutched to her chest. The chamber itself was cold and oppressive, illuminated by the eerie glow of alien world lights that cast long shadows across the tiered seating arrangements. Hundreds of species were represented here, from the gas-breathing hydrons to the crystalline nethys, all gathered in this ancient place of power. The multilateral authority it represented had stood for 3 millennia before humans had even discovered faster-than-light travel. Speaker Vexathera, the 4-armed Zilani leader, whose translucent skin rippled with bioluminescent patterns of authority, tapped a ceremonial staff against the chamber floor. The council session had officially begun. Ambassador Morrison, the speaker's voice scraped like metal against stone, a stark contrast to the measured tones humans preferred in diplomatic discourse. We welcome Earth's representative to the 4,009th gathering of the Galactic Council. Jake inclined his head, the practiced gesture of respect he had performed countless times before. But something was different today. The whispers among the council members, the way the Taurans and Nethys representatives leaned toward each other, exchanging glances that spoke volumes in the silent language of conspiracy. Before we address the trade regulations in the Orion Arm, Vexathera continued, we must first attend to Resolution 4471 regarding human mining operations in the Outer Rim territories. Lieutenant Sullivan tensed beside him. They had received no notice of such a resolution. Jake maintained his diplomatic mask, but his right hand curled into a fist beneath the folds of his formal attire. Resolution 4471, the speaker continued, unfurling a holographic document that hung in the air between them, declares all human mining rights in the Outer Rim territories null and void, effective immediately. The Council has determined these resources are better managed under direct Zilani oversight. A murmur rippled through the chamber. Jake felt a cold realization wash over him. This wasn't a negotiation or even a discussion. It was a declaration, a unilateral decision made without consulting Earth or its colonies. Speaker Vexathera, Jake said, his voice steady despite the anger building inside him. Humanity has invested considerable resources developing those mining operations. Our colonies in the Outer Rim depend on them for survival. On what grounds does the Council justify this action? The Zilani's skin flashed patterns of condescension. The grounds, Ambassador, are simple. The Council has observed human mining techniques and found them inefficient and potentially damaging to spatial integrity. As the more experienced spacefaring civilization, it is our responsibility to guide younger species away from potential mistakes. And there it was, the truth that Jake had suspected for years, but had never heard stated so plainly. After 3 decades of service, after fighting the Council's wars and healing their sick, humanity was still considered a younger species, children to be guided, not equals to be respected. Lieutenant Sullivan whispered, Sir, protocol dictates we request a formal review period. But Jake Morrison had reached the end of his diplomatic patience. 30 years of bowing and scraping, of following protocols designed by species who considered humans beneath them. 30 years of pretending that humanity was being groomed for full council membership when, in reality, they were being kept in perpetual subservience. Speaker Vexathera, Jake said, his voice now carrying to every corner of the chamber without technological assistance. I would like to remind the Council of Humanity's contributions over the past 3 decades. He stepped forward, away from the designated speaking position, an immediate breach of protocol that caused gasps among the more traditional council members. Humanity fought and won the Draxus conflict when the Zelani fleet faltered. Our medical technology ended the Tauran plague that had defied council scientists for centuries. Our engineers designed the current FTL corridors that allow commerce to flow throughout council space. The chamber had gone completely still. Even Vexathara seemed surprised by the ambassador's audacity. And in return, Jake continued, we have been patronized, restricted, and now robbed. The mining operations in the Outer Rim were established by human colonists who risked everything to develop those worlds when the Council deemed them unprofitable. Now that they've proven valuable, you claim oversight? Ambassador Morrison, Vexathara's voice had turned icy. Your emotional display is precisely why the Council must make decisions for species still learning galactic diplomacy. If you cannot discuss this rationally— Rationality has nothing to do with it, Jake interrupted, another shocking breach of protocol. This is about respect, or rather, the lack of it. He turned to face the entire assembly, addressing all species present. For 30 years, humanity has contributed to this council as equals indeed, while being treated as subordinates in status. We have waited patiently for recognition that, it seems, will never come. Lieutenant Sullivan's eyes widened as she realized what was about to happen. Ambassador, she whispered urgently, please consider— But Jake Morrison had already made his decision. He pulled out his datapad and slammed it down on the central podium with such force that the sound reverberated throughout the chamber. As of this moment, by the authority vested in me by the President and Congress of the United Earth Government, I hereby withdraw humanity from the Galactic Council and all its associated treaties, effective immediately. The chamber erupted into chaos. Delegates shouted in dozens of languages. Translators struggled to keep pace, and Vexathara's skin flashed patterns of alarm and outrage. You cannot simply withdraw, the speaker shouted over the din. There are procedures, cooling-off periods, transition agreements, all defined by the Council, not by mutual consent, Jake replied calmly. Since you treat us as children rather than equals, we see no obligation to follow rules in which we had no meaningful input. He turned to Lieutenant Sullivan, whose face had gone pale. Contact Earth. Inform President Carter that I've initiated Contingency Omega. As they walked toward the chamber exit, leaving stunned silence in their wake, Kate finally found her voice. Sir, the consequences will be severe, Jake finished for her. For everyone. But sometimes, Lieutenant, respect must be taken when it isn't freely given. The massive doors of the council chamber closed behind them with a resonant boom that seemed to mark the end of an era and the beginning of something entirely new and entirely uncertain. Within hours, the news spread across the galaxy like wildfire. Human diplomatic missions on council worlds received encrypted orders to evacuate immediately. Military vessels in joint exercises broke formation and jumped to hyperspace. Scientific collaborations went dark as human researchers packed up their equipment and data. At the Central Medical Research Station orbiting Tauran Prime, Dr. Ryan Phillips stared in disbelief at the message on his screen. As head of the Human Medical Corps assigned to the station, he had spent 15 years developing cures for cross-species pathogens. His team was 3 months away from a breakthrough in treating the neurological degradation syndrome affecting the Korak Federation. Dr. Phillips, his assistant, called from the doorway. The transport is waiting. We have to leave now. But the NDS research, Ryan protested, gesturing to the lab where cultures and samples represented years of work. The Korak will start dying again within weeks if we abandon this. Orders are orders, sir, from Earth directly. Ryan looked around at the lab one last time, then made a decision. He quickly transferred all research data to a portable drive and slipped it into his pocket. Technically, a violation of the withdrawal protocols. But he couldn't let years of life-saving research disappear. As the human medical team departed, their Tauran colleagues watched in confusion and growing fear. Without human medical expertise, many treatments would soon become unavailable. The same scene repeated across council space as human engineers abandoned half-completed terraforming projects. Trade specialists withdrew from economic zones, and peacekeeping forces departed from conflict regions. The consequences were immediate and far-reaching. Trade routes that had relied on human navigational technology began to collapse. Allied species that had depended on human agricultural techniques faced impending food shortages. Research projects stalled without human scientists, whose innovative approaches had driven progress. On Earth, President Lisa Carter addressed an emergency session of Congress, a stern woman with decades of political experience. She had authorized Contingency Omega years ago, but never expected it would actually be implemented. Ambassador Morrison acted within his authority, she informed the assembled representatives. And his assessment of council intentions appears correct. The Zelani and their allies have consistently worked to undermine human sovereignty while benefiting from our contributions. Madam President, Senator Williams interjected, the economic impact of this withdrawal will be catastrophic. Half our colonies depend on council trade. And the other half, Carter countered, have been strangled by council restrictions. Our analysis suggests short-term hardship, but long-term growth, now that we're free to develop without artificial constraints. Across human space, reactions were mixed. On New Texas, Governor Sam Wade saw opportunity in the chaos, immediately authorizing expanded mining operations in previously restricted zones. The council kept us on a leash, he told his colonial assembly. Now we run free. But on frontier worlds like New Geneva, where human settlements existed alongside alien enclaves, the situation was more complex. Captain Alex Rodriguez, commanding the defense garrison, received desperate pleas from Mandari locals who had integrated with human society. Earth says to withdraw all support, Rodriguez told his officers. But if we pull our atmospheric processors, the Mandari settlement will be exposed to toxic gases within days. So we just let them die? Lieutenant Maria Chen asked. No, Rodriguez decided after a moment's thought. Official orders are to withdraw human personnel. They say nothing about leaving equipment behind. The processors stay. Similar acts of compassion and defiance occurred throughout former council space, as individual humans made choices based on conscience rather than policy. Yet, despite these isolated exceptions, the overall impact of humanity's withdrawal was devastating to many worlds that had grown dependent on human expertise and resources. In the Korak Federation, where Dr. Phillips's research had been preventing thousands of deaths, the first new cases of neurological degradation syndrome appeared within weeks. Desperate messages were sent to Earth, begging for humanitarian assistance. But the official response remained firm. All council worlds must recognize human sovereignty before relations could be restored. 3 months after the withdrawal, the galactic situation had deteriorated further. Without human peacekeeping forces maintaining stability in disputed regions, opportunistic powers began making moves to expand their influence. Most concerning was the Drar Empire, a militaristic regime that had been contained for decades by a coalition of council and human forces. With that coalition fractured, the Drar launched a sudden offensive against the Mandari worlds. Their invasion fleet carried a terrifying new weapon, a planet cracker, capable of shattering a world's crust and rendering it uninhabitable. The first demonstration on the outer Mandari colony of Tellus killed 8 million sentients in minutes. The Council, caught unprepared by the aggression, struggled to mount an effective response. Their warships, designed with the expectation of human tactical support, proved inadequate against Drar battle strategies. The fall of 3 more Mandari worlds followed in quick succession. On Earth, the crisis presented President Carter with a moral dilemma. The Mandari had been allies before the withdrawal, and millions more would die without intervention. Yet breaking humanity's isolation so soon might be interpreted as weakness. The Draar were contained because they feared our combined strength, Admiral Ben Harris argued during an Emergency Security Council meeting. If we don't respond, they'll keep expanding until they eventually reach human space anyway. Our intelligence suggests they've already begun production of multiple planet crackers, added General Chris Baker. This is an existential threat, not just to the Mandari, but potentially to Earth itself. The debate might have continued indefinitely, if not for a crucial development. A Mandari operative, at great personal risk, managed to transmit stolen technical specifications of the planet cracker weapon to human intelligence. Analysis confirmed the Draar could eventually modify the technology to target Earth from safe distances. What had been a political crisis became an existential one. President Carter convened her closest advisors in the White House Situation Room. If we intervene now, Jake Morrison argued, having returned to Earth a hero in some circles and a pariah in others, we demonstrate both our military capability and our moral authority. The Council abandoned the Mandari. We will not. The Council will see it as proof they were right to try controlling us, countered Defense Secretary James Wilson. They'll claim our emotional response proves their point. President Carter, who had listened silently to the debate, finally spoke. I'm not interested in what the Council thinks anymore. I'm interested in preventing genocide and protecting humanity from a weapon that could eventually reach our worlds. She stood, her decision made. Admiral Harris, you have authorization to deploy the home fleet to the Mandari system. Your objectives are to destroy the Draar invasion force and neutralize all planet cracker weapons. And the Council forces in the region? Harris asked. Avoid engagement if possible, Carter replied. But make it clear, this is a human operation. We neither request permission nor require assistance. The order went out, and across human space, military vessels that had been on alert since the withdrawal began jumping toward assembly points. Within days, the largest human battle fleet ever assembled, 200 warships ranging from nimble destroyers to massive dreadnoughts, prepared to enter the Mandari system. Lieutenant Sarah Parker, pilot of the advanced fighter Raptor 217, sat in her cockpit aboard the carrier HSS Indomitable, listening to the pre-battle briefing. The Draar have approximately 3,000 vessels in the Mandari system, came the tactical officer's voice through her headset. They're supported by 3 planet crackers positioned to target the Mandari homeworld. Council forces are scattered and ineffective. This is on us. Sarah checked her weapon systems one final time. She had joined the Space Force to explore, not to fight. But the images of Tellus, a world cracked open like an egg, its inhabitants boiled away in an instant, had hardened her resolve. All pilots, came Admiral Harris's voice over the fleet-wide channel. In 5 minutes we make the jump to Mandari space. What you do there will be remembered for generations. Humanity withdrew from the Council because we were not respected as equals. Today, we earn that respect not through words but through deeds. At precisely 700 Earth Standard Time, the human fleet dropped out of hyperspace in perfect formation around the Mandari homeworld. The surprise was total. Draar vessels, deployed in a loose blockade pattern, were caught completely unprepared for the sudden appearance of such an overwhelming force. The battle that followed would be studied in military academies for centuries. Human warships, freed from Council tactical restrictions, employed innovative maneuvers and weapons configurations that confused and overwhelmed the numerically superior Draar. Fighter squadrons led by pilots like Sarah Parker struck with precision at enemy command and control nodes, while heavy cruisers engaged the main Draar battle groups. The Council vessels present could only watch in astonishment as humans demonstrated military prowess far beyond what they had shown while operating under Council constraints. It became clear that humanity had been holding back, developing technologies and tactics in secret even while serving as loyal council members. The three planet crackers, the pride of the Drar fleet, became the primary targets. Two were destroyed in the initial assault, but the third activated its primary weapon, aiming directly at the Mandari homeworld, where billions of innocents waited in terror. Lieutenant Parker, seeing the weapon powering up and realizing no other assets were in position to stop it, made a split-second decision. She directed her Raptor straight for the planet cracker's exposed energy core, broadcasting a simple message. For Earth, for Mandari, for all of us. Her fighter, moving at near relativistic speed, struck the planet cracker precisely at its most vulnerable point. The resulting explosion was visible from the surface of the Mandari homeworld. A new, brief star in the sky that represented one human sacrifice to save billions of alien lives. The Drar fleet, having lost its superweapons and nearly half its conventional forces, began a disorganized retreat. Admiral Harris, rather than allowing them to escape and potentially regroup, ordered a pursuit that would continue for weeks, systematically dismantling the Drar military capability. When the final tally was calculated, humanity had lost 47 ships and approximately 15,000 personnel. A steep price, but one that had purchased the lives of billions and demonstrated beyond any doubt that humans were a force to be reckoned with. The victory at the Battle of the Mandari system was broadcast throughout Council space. The footage, particularly Lieutenant Parker's sacrifice, galvanized opinion across hundreds of worlds. Species that had previously accepted Council authority without question began to reconsider their positions. The Taurans, who had suffered greatly without human medical assistance, were the first to formally recognize human sovereignty and request bilateral relations outside Council frameworks. They were soon followed by the Korek Federation, desperate to restart Dr. Phillips's research program. Within weeks, dozens of species had established direct diplomatic channels with Earth, bypassing the Council entirely. Meanwhile, in an emergency session on Nexus Prime, the Galactic Council found itself increasingly irrelevant. Member worlds openly defected, declaring their intention to form new alliances with humanity. Speaker Vexathera, watching her authority crumble, finally recognized the magnitude of her miscalculation. "We treated them as children," she confided to her remaining allies, "when we should have recognized them as successors." For Jake Morrison, the architect of humanity's new position in the galaxy, vindication came with heavy responsibility. Appointed as Earth's first diplomatic coordinator, effectively the foreign minister for all human-alien relations, he worked tirelessly to establish new frameworks for cooperation that recognized the sovereignty and dignity of all participating species. "We didn't leave the Council to become isolated," he explained to Lieutenant Sullivan, now promoted to his Chief of Staff. "We left to build something better, something based on mutual respect rather than paternalism." President Carter, whose decisive leadership during the crisis had transformed her from a cautious administrator to a visionary commander, addressed the United Earth Congress on the first anniversary of the withdrawal. "When Ambassador Morrison left the Council chamber 1 year ago, many feared we had consigned humanity to isolation and decline," she said. "Instead, we have expanded our influence, strengthened our security, and built new relationships based on genuine partnership rather than subservience." The speech was broadcast across human space and to dozens of alien worlds that had formed what was informally called the Human Alliance, though Carter was careful to emphasize that Earth sought partners, not subjects. "We have no desire to replace the Council as galactic overlords," she continued. "Instead, we offer a different vision, one where each species contributes according to its strengths and receives the full respect it deserves. The Mandari bring their unparalleled understanding of quantum communications. The Taurans offer their biological insights. The Korach provide their artistic and philosophical perspectives. And yes, Humanity brings its innovation, adaptability, and sometimes its righteous indignation when faced with injustice. 5 years after humanity's departure from the Council, the galactic landscape had transformed completely. The human colonial empire, a misleading name for what was actually a loose confederation of sovereign human worlds, spanned 400 star systems. More significantly, it had formed binding treaties with over 30 alien civilizations, creating an economic and military alliance that dwarfed the diminished Council. In a ceremony aboard the orbital station New Harmony, representatives from the Korak, Mandari, Tauran, and Hydran civilizations signed formal treaties recognizing human sovereignty and establishing mutual defense pacts. The symbolism was lost on no one. These were species that had once sat on the Council, now treating humans as their most valued allies. The galaxy is safer and more prosperous when species cooperate as equals, President Carter declared at the signing ceremony. The old Council failed not because cooperation is impossible, but because true cooperation cannot exist without mutual respect. Back on Nexus Prime, in the now largely abandoned Galactic Council chamber, Speaker Vexathara sat alone, contemplating the ruins of an institution that had stood for millennia. The chamber, once bustling with representatives from hundreds of worlds, now echoed with emptiness. Most species had either joined humanity's alliance or formed their own regional pacts. "We built this council to unite the galaxy," she whispered to herself. "But in our arrogance, we planted the seeds of its destruction. We failed to recognize that true leadership means knowing when to step aside for those who bring new strength and new vision." As she rose to leave the chamber for what would likely be the final time, a message arrived on her personal communicator. It was from Ambassador Morrison, now one of the most powerful diplomatic figures in the galaxy. Speaker Vexathara, it read. Earth is hosting a summit next month to discuss interstellar navigation rights. As one who has witnessed the entire arc of human council relations, your perspective would be valued. Not as our superior, but as our equal in the community of galactic civilizations. Will you attend? She stared at the message for a long moment, then composed her reply with careful dignity. I would be honored to attend as Vexathara of Zelani, not as speaker of a council that failed to understand the very unity it claimed to champion. As her message was transmitted across the vast distances to Earth, she looked once more around the ancient chamber. Perhaps the Council's greatest legacy would not be its 3,000 years of dominance, but rather the lesson it had inadvertently taught, that true respect must be earned, not granted by bureaucracy, and that a civilization that underestimates others invites its own undoing. In the decades that followed, school children across hundreds of worlds would learn about the day humanity left, the pivot point that reshaped galactic history. They would learn about Ambassador Jake Morrison's defiance, President Lisa Carter's resolve, and Lieutenant Sarah Parker's sacrifice. But most importantly, they would understand that the greatest power in the universe is not technology or military might, but the simple, profound dignity of being treated as an equal. On the bridge of the exploration vessel, HSS Discovery, Captain Michael Chen, son of Lieutenant Maria Chen, who had served under Captain Rodriguez during the withdrawal, prepared to lead the first joint human-alien expedition beyond the known galaxy. Captain's log, he dictated, as his diverse crew, human, Mandari, Tauran, and others, prepared for the jump to uncharted space. As we venture into the unknown, we carry with us the lessons of our shared history. The Council fell because it failed to adapt. Our alliance thrives because we recognize that diversity is strength, that innovation comes from freedom, and that true cooperation can only exist between equals. He paused, looking at the starfield on the main view screen. 5 years ago, humanity stood alone against the galaxy. Today, we stand with friends and allies as we face the ultimate frontier. This is the legacy of the day humanity left the Council. Not isolation, but a new beginning for all sentient life. With a command from Captain Chen, the Discovery jumped to hyperspace, carrying the hopes and dreams of a galaxy transformed by one ambassador's refusal to accept anything less than the respect humanity had earned. And somewhere, in the vast emptiness of the abandoned council chamber, the echoes of that fateful decision continued to reverberate through time and space, a reminder that the course of history can change in an instant when someone finally says enough and charts a new path forward.